Hello, everyone. This is Jens Heitland. Welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's guest is experienced designer, educator, and change agent. He's helping event professionals to create positive behavior change with purposeful design. He's the director of North America for the Event Design Collective. Please welcome to the show, Anthony Vade. Hello, Anthony. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I've been loving your content online. I've been following it all. I've been listening to these podcasts. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and honored to be here amongst so many great innovators from around the world. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you. So before we go into innovation and event design and a lot of interesting topics, tell us a little bit of who you are. What is your story?
Oh, it's a long story, a deep storied past. No, let's go way back. Why not? You know, it's a podcast. We can afford to have a bit of storytelling here. I was that kid who always tormented my parents by having a screwdriver in my hand. I had to pull everything apart around the house. I needed to know how the radio worked or how different bits and pieces made the house stay together. And so they were constantly following me around and trying to repair the things that I was dissecting to understand them at a deeper level. And that kind of continued throughout my life. I had a deep interest on why things are the way they are and how things can be better. I struggled through school because I was always asking those kinds of questions. And most of the time, academic institutions don't love the over-questioning student. So I struggled through that sort of canonical thinking within the schooling system and went through university and became a jack of all trades because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just interested in everything. Did way too many subjects at university, none of which aligned to any linear path towards a proper career, but all of which spurred interest in me in the areas that I would like to get into. And I was drawn, obviously pulling things apart towards technology and the role that technology plays in creating a better world in particular. So I started to dabble in that. I was fascinated by the media as well. So I got involved with radio and filmmaking and a bit of television in the early years. That led me into theater because theater is an amazing space for storytelling and really immersive experiences. So I worked in the theater for a while. Then I got drawn into the nightclub scene because of course you do, you know, you want to mix things up from the high arts and get a bit dirty. So I spent a few years managing a nightclub and a theater entertainment complex, which was interesting. And then that dragged me into big event production. I got drawn into a startup company in my hometown of Adelaide, South Australia, and they were doing great things. And together over the 8 years that I was with them, we built that business up and expanded from a lot of concert touring and music festival production that we were doing, a lot of big scale stuff down in Australia because that scene is huge. And then we started to branch them out into more corporate work. So slowly I was doing more and more high level brand activations, big corporate conferencing, which obviously still fairly focused on the technology and the production side, calling shows, designing shows, doing the technical engineering for shows. And then slowly, as I immigrated over to Canada, I got more involved with some of the bigger audiovisual companies that were putting on events, and went through. It's a whole separate story, but went through a whole bunch of mergers and acquisitions with these different small companies in Canada, and ended up working for the largest audiovisual company in the world. Spent a few years with them, heading up their experience design department, which was interesting to bring the concept of experience design to a very technology focused organization that hadn't really done a lot of user-centric design. They'd done a lot subconsciously, but they didn't have any structural process to do that. So in creating their experience design department and their experience architecture concepts, I got looped in with the gents from the Event Design Collective and learned about the event canvas and the methodology that they use and how they apply design thinking to events. And I just fell in love. I finally found a language, a way of thinking, and a method that was similar to the things that I'd been doing in my in my discoverer, adventurer mindset my entire life. And I met this community that was all about that as well. These were the same kids with the same kinds of screwdrivers running around. And as a result, I got deeper into that. And now I spend my full time with the Event Design Collective, championing the event canvas design methodology, helping event professionals, event owners, and businesses optimize the experiences that they create so that they can make sure that the events aren't just happenstance moments, but instead the events are real catalysts for positive change within organizations. So I spend all my time consulting on that methodology and training other professionals around the world on how to apply it for themselves so that they can make big impact with their events as well.
Thank you very much for the story. I would like to double click on one thing. How did you end up in Canada? From Australia, it's like a warm country to a cold country. It's like, I don't get it.
And I tell you, you may have noticed this as you've traveled around the world. Australians are everywhere. Yeah. There is this big culture in Australia where we get out and we see the world, and we are very isolated down south. So you feel isolated down there. So we want to get out and we want to explore. A lot of Australians do, and a lot in the UK as well, do a gap year. The idea being, you finish high school, you spend a year traveling. Normally Australians are backpacking, which is why you see all these 20-somethings around. And then you go back to Australia and you get into your university course and you go back to school. I didn't do a gap year. I went straight out of high school, straight into university. So all through my 20s, I was like, oh, I want to adventure. I never did the reckless backpacking thing. So I managed to convince my wife when we got married in 2008, because she never did it either. I said, can we go on an adventure? Do you want to, instead of going on a honeymoon, should we move to Canada for a year and see what happens? And of course, everyone thought we were mad, but I was just the kid with the screwdriver again, pulling apart and trying to find something new and find adventure. And she is the bravest woman I've ever met. One, she married me, and two, she agreed to the adventure. So we moved to Canada, and it really was, it was really about the difference. Australia's hot, dry, white sand beaches, and it's beautiful. And everyone's like, you're mad. But I didn't want that. I had that for 30 years of my life. I wanted the mountains, the green trees, the ski slopes, and all those foreign things, to experience those and make them different. So that was what spurred us to get out and have adventure. And we haven't stopped from that point. We've moved multiple times, and I don't think it's going to be our last move now in Toronto, Canada. So we started in Vancouver, we've moved to Toronto, and people ask us, when are you going to settle down? I got a feeling we're going to be Rolling Stones, going our whole life and finding new adventure, because it's just in us. We just seek that kind of adventure.
Yeah, I can highly relate to that. It's like for us, it's always when we're getting to the border of 2 years in a place, then it's like, yeah, what's out there?
It's the itch, right? You get itchy.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I've built up my company Remote First, that I can do that going forward, to say, yeah, let's go somewhere warm, let's go somewhere cold. Maybe it's half a year there, maybe it's half a year there. We'll figure out.
And then that can be very uncomfortable for people. A lot of people seek the stability and the reliability and the consistency of having a home base, or to know that's their house for the rest of their life. But I've noticed, and I don't want to steer us too fast into this conversation, but I've noticed that the true innovators in my world and in my community kind of share this kind of mindset that, okay, I'm not going to get held down because I want to be open to opportunities, to possibilities, and abundance is everywhere. So why would I lock myself into this time and place in this location when there could be opportunities for innovation, new thinking, and new experiences elsewhere? And so, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think one part of that is exploring, where it's like, hey, what's out there? What's this? What's that? Asking stupid questions, basically. And the other part is connecting to others, understanding and listening to others, and exploring with them. I just have seen it. Like, I've lived now in 4 countries, and it's so different in each city, country, wherever you are. And you meet people and you learn so much.
Yeah. And it's that act of meeting the foreign. It's the act of collaborating and creating new things with people who don't think like you and don't have your background or your perspective on the world, that unlocks something in your own mind. Like it allows you to look at your past and your experiences and understand a bit more how they've shaped the choices you're making in the future, because you see through the other people's eyes. I implore anybody out there who's seeking innovation and wants to shift their mindset, get adventurous, get out there and explore a bit more. Don't take the trip to Mexico and the all-inclusive resort that you always would, right? The thing you know is going to be the thing. Pick something that's a bit riskier, because it will open something in your mind if you go after that adventure.
No, 100%. It's really opening up so much for me. An additional part of that is as well, I learned the languages inside the countries where I was living, which, I mean, it's far from being fluent or good in it, but at least it unlocks another thing, which is the culture aspects, where you think you understand it if you live there, but it's not true. If you learn the language, and then it's slowly opening up and you see things completely different. Like I've learned to speak Russian, which is a very difficult language for everyone, anyone who has tried it. And it opened up so much for us as a family, and as well cultural understanding of the country, of the culture itself. It's super interesting.
Amazing. I wish I could speak another language. Being in Canada for 10 years now, I tried to get into my French, but it is, and as you can hear by the accent, the Aussie accent doesn't, it does us favors when we're speaking English, doesn't do us any favors with other languages, because we have the most ridiculous accent in other languages. And I tried to get into my French here for the Quebec Canadians, and they just would shake their head and laugh at me the whole time. And I just felt like I was ruining their language in front of them. So I'm very envious of you and all the other Europeans who have had that as part of your wider culture, that you have access to these languages and a way to get into it. So yeah, very jealous of you. Congrats.
Thank you. I mean, it's going a faster way, I can tell you.
Practice.
Yeah. So let's get into innovation and directly combine it. I mean, you're a master in event design, and I would like to start high level. It's like, what is event design?
Yeah, so event design, and there's been a lot of issues with event design over the last 5 years within the events industry, understanding what event design is. Traditionally, for a long time, people, when you say the word design in events, get very honed in and focused on aesthetics. It's a lot of what is the color of the space? What is the lighting? What is the event branding? How do the centerpieces look? Do we have chair covers and pretty bows on them? Absolutely, that is part of design. But what we're really looking at in the events industry now is expanding out of aesthetic design and visual design and start to look more around experience design, as many people in the technology sector have been working in for many years, and a lot of people in gaming and areas like that. So the events industry has woken up to that, and they've realized that really event design needs to be about crafting experiences for human beings. All those other elements play a role in that, the aesthetics, the technology, but really it's about storytelling. It's about immersing people in emotive experiences that stick with them, and to be truly successful, change their behaviors through the experience that they have. So for us, event design is, first of all, we need to understand what an event is. And we have a couple of simple rules to understand that within the Event Design Collective. To have an event, you must have 2 or more stakeholders, someone hosting the event, someone participating in the event. But we believe there's a plethora of other stakeholders around who have different objectives. So you have to have 2 stakeholders, and through the event, their behaviors have to change in some way. If you're not changing their behaviors, then it's probably not really a successful event. So we really look at how do we map out the experience journey and the instructional design, and how do we make sure that that experience journey that these people go through, all the touch points that they have from the day you decide to host the event, weeks, months, years, or however long you push out past that event. What are all those moments, and the instructional design, what are we teaching them? And through those moments and in those experiences that they have, how is that shifting their behavior? How is that messaging those kinds of programming activations, whatever it may be. Every event's different, of course. How is that shifting the needle forward? How is that shifting their behavior in a positive way so that over time, that event is not only its own microcosm of experiences that only relate to there and then, but it actually feeds future change for organizations, businesses, associations, future change incrementally, and every event and moment that they have from that point on feeds that overarching aim that the organization has. And it's kind of forces of event planners who are very linear thinkers, it forces them to get a bit more into the mud and some of the dirtiness of discovering true problems, true deep-seated needs for their customers, for their industries, for their associations, and then look at, okay, if these are the deep-seated needs with these organizations, how do we achieve those needs and those change? And then how do we space that out over a lifespan of an event or multiple events or multiple years or whatever's appropriate for that organization? So it's a matter of delivering intention and purpose really behind what the event is, why it exists, and being able to articulate that to everybody involved in the event so that everybody's aligned along the same path to achieve that overarching aim.
Yeah. And do I understand you right that it doesn't really matter how big the event is? Because when you, like, I'm having a very large corporate background, event was always something like 200 plus people. Everything else is like a meeting.
Yeah.
But I guess it's this meeting is a kind of event, or if you look into behavior change, it's an event too, and you should consider how to set it up in a way that it is successful.
I mean, really, what we're doing right now, in my opinion, is an event. A podcast is an event. We have 3 stakeholders, in my opinion. We have me. I have something that I need to get out of this podcast experience with you.
Yeah.
We have you. You need to get something out of this podcast experience, have certain expectations. You're making certain commitments. You expect certain returns from it. And the audience listening, or the audience watching even, because I believe you may put this on YouTube.
Yes.
Those 2 different stakeholders have different expectations and outcomes from what this podcast is about and what this content can do for them. So when we say it's just a little meeting, that little meeting, if it's an effective meeting, and every meeting and every event should be effective, if it's an effective meeting, it needs to serve the purpose of that overarching aim. So if you look at it that way and go, it doesn't matter as long as there are 2 stakeholders involved. Because one stakeholder is a solo enterprise, and there's another crude word we use for doing things on our own, and I won't talk about it now because you'll have to censor me. But as long as there's 2 people, that's an event, and that event should serve not only the purpose and the time, but the future needs as well. And that's really when people get that and it clicks in their mind that it's not just about the most immediate horizon that I can see. Yeah. It's about the horizons after that. Then all of a sudden, that little meeting in the boardroom for 6 people that you thought wasn't that big a deal, and we'll just put some muffins on and let the executives argue. If you can craft into that elements of experience and elements of instructional design that serve the overarching aim, then that meeting stops just being another meeting and starts being an important step and another catalyst towards that change that you're trying to achieve. So please, everyone out there, do not diminish the importance of your meetings. I know you're sick to death of Zoom meetings and bad Teams meetings and bad sales presentations, but if we apply event design to those 2, they can be better, they can be more impactful, and they can get better results for organizations.
Yeah. So let's take a small example. So we do a small one and we do a bigger one.
Sure.
Let's say you're a mid-sized company. You're a company that's now like everyone is on Zoom. You have certain recurring meetings. How would you approach that with an event design perspective? Where it's like, how can we make this meetings better and more efficient and more effective, like you said?
Yeah, and one of the challenges is the first thing that most people would fall back on is, how do I schedule this thing? How do I put the sequence in the right order? Because for the most part, event planners, event managers, and even event producers are linear thinkers. They think about, and from A to B, from A to Z. But I think we need to break that a little bit, and I think it's that ability to bring the team together And this is something that rarely happens in events as well. There's a lot of carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders with event planners. They try and do it all. And I think bringing the team together, bringing people within the organization into the conversation earlier so that you can reveal those overarching aims. You can start understanding the human beings. What really are their pains? What are their gains? And once you have that deep empathy and that understanding of that baseline, where we are now, then the other things kind of fall into place. As long as you remember to reference that baseline regularly with your team and within the organization. So I think we have a tendency to lay out the strategic plan. Here's our 3-year plan. And some organizations are great at re-referencing that and reminding, a lot of senior executives and CEOs are told, keep that message, keep drilling that message into your people repeatedly because they don't remember it as much as you think they do, and they need to be reminded. Events are the same, that they need to understand why they're going into the event. If it's a 6-person meeting, then that is just as important to communicate what that meeting's role is, how it's going to serve that zoomed out look, and then zoom in to go, okay, this 6-person meeting, what do we need to achieve? What needs to come out of this? And then how does this meeting and the outcomes from this link into the next one that we plan? And if you have this culture of linkage, you have this culture of zooming into the moment and zooming out to the bigger picture, organizations and team members within it start to see that pattern and they start to seek it out. And they start to walk into a meeting, if it's a 6-person or a 200-person meeting, looking for that pattern. And they start asking questions then within the organization, which is, I think, what most organizations need is proactive seeking of alignments, cohesion, and togetherness towards that overarching aim. So as you build out these teams, you involve people more in the design and what's going to happen at the events. They start to understand that they can contribute. They start to seek patterns for alignment and start to talk to each other and start aligning each other. And less of the responsibility falls on the event planner, the communications department, the HR department, or whoever else in the organization normally wears the weight of that, because the design or the outcomes of the design become part of that organizational's culture, if that makes sense. They start to seek it out. So people are pretty smart. A lot smarter than we like to give them credit for. And some of the subconscious pattern recognition that we go through is a very powerful tool if we can start to help people to help themselves through that. But we can't do that. We can't do that if we're a mess too. If we don't have a process, if we don't have a structure, if we don't have a strong narrative that we can share and that can explain the overarching aim to the staff members, then it's very hard to get them on that event journey with you iteratively over time. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. Love that. Because, I mean, just coming from corporations, what I've always seen and still see a lot is like, hey, let's jump on a meeting. There's no purpose. There's no real idea. I mean, yes, there is a purpose because there needs to be something discussed, but it's, let's say it's not planned. And maybe it sounds like you overdo it sometimes when you do all of that, but I think it's not overdoing it. It's like making it more efficient. If you take a little bit more time in doing it deliberately to a specific outcome and designing it into that perspective. And I think that's at least what I've seen over and over again, which is not always happening. Let's say it like this.
And look, if you have effective strategy, if you have effective understanding of the goals of an organization, that conversation and that realignment and that reminding everybody why we're here and how it relates, that could be 4 minutes in a 60-minute meeting,
exactly.
Or 30-minute meeting. It's 2 minutes at the start and 2 minutes at the end. But we got a bookend because you kick off the meeting going, hey, this is why we're here, everybody. Remember, this is what we're trying to achieve. These are the steps we're going to take. This meeting's about this. Let's go. And then at the end, great meeting, everybody. This is what at the start of this meeting, we were going to achieve this. We were going to discuss this. And as we leave this meeting, you need to do these steps in order for us to achieve that longer goal that we talked about. So constantly getting back and bookending and setting up the team to collaborate around that goal is really valuable. And so often we get into meetings with finite agendas that we need, we think it's about this, but really that meeting's about more. And we need to remind everybody that, yes, we work in the moment and for the immediate need, but those immediate needs need to serve later on as well.
And the fun part of that is, again, corporate background, sorry if I mention that too often, is like, then you wonder that the decisions are taking outside the meeting, the decisions are taking at the coffee break rather than inside the meeting.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Imagine if you could design a way to capture some of that coffee water cooler talk, or give people avenues to feed that stuff back in to whatever you're doing. Like we miss those little opportunities. And once again, that's an event. The water cooler talk, the coffee at the coffee station, there's multiple stakeholders there. They have something at stake. They want some change to happen. It never feeds back into what the organization's doing, because we haven't thought about, it's not that we don't know, we haven't thought about how we can incorporate those kinds of dialogues, those kinds of experiences into the greater good that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to take a bigger perspective. So imagine I'm running a company, and I want to set a company up for a new direction. So until now, we're not the market leader, but we're not the worst. We're a good follower of the trends of what's coming up. But we want to shift our company towards, hey, we want to be the trendsetter. We want to really go into that direction. How would you approach that from an event design? How would you build that event design perspective into changing a strategy, changing a landscape of an organization?
Should I give you an example? Would that help to explain it?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll give you the example of the last of one of my last award-winning projects. It was for a large energy company in Alberta, Canada, and it was for a large refinery that they had up there. They had a large leadership team, and for the most part, it had been run fairly well. They had a good safety record. Wasn't the best in the world, but it was fairly high. But they knew that through team alignment and good leadership, they could improve that even more. And they wanted to make their plant one of the leaders in the world for safety. They knew they couldn't achieve that. Excuse me. They knew that they couldn't achieve that if they didn't have the leadership team believing in their heart of hearts that it was possible, that it was important, and that they played the most important role in bringing that safety to the forefront and leading their teams to improve that realm. So that was kind of the overarching aim and the goal that the executive had. So what we did with that organization, and some amazing companies worked with us on it and collaborated. As I said, design's a team sport. We brought all the players together to contribute their perspectives. We had True Event Management, great event management company, really forward focus, so they could look at a lot of the logistical points behind it. We had FMAV, great technology company in Canada, so they could put a lot of the pieces in place to achieve what we were looking for. I was working with the team. They had instructional designers on the staff as well, so we brought them in and we engaged with executive at a level, fairly intimate level, more so than many executives would give time to, because we were having conversations, these deep conversations about, okay, who are these leaders? How do they tick? And we really deep empathy with them. And we recognized that this change wasn't going to be solved at a seminar. Like there's a great sales quote, I think it was David Sandler, who said, you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. Almost impossible, right? You go in for one day to a hotel ballroom. To shift leadership's attitude and behaviors from one day in a Holiday Inn, very hard, very difficult. So they recognized that it was going to take a longer time. So we said, well, let's do a 12-month long event. Let's take, I think it was 1,500 leaders from this organization, and let's feed them through multiple stages, multiple modules of learning, but do it in an experiential and immersive environment that encourages them to engage in the way that we need them to engage. So I'll cut long story short. There was a ton of instructional design and experience design that went into it. But what the end experience looked like is groups of about 25 leaders. So there was something like 60 odd training sessions that went through. It was day-long training sessions, 8 hours at that time, pre-pandemic, of course. 25 of them would get together at their usual training space. They had some basic corporate training within the refinery. Wasn't very, very old school, traditional school type setups. But they pulled them out of that. They put them on a bus and they drove them to a small light airplane hangar. It's on the outskirts of Edmonton in Alberta, but it was fairly close to where the main headquarters were as well. So it wasn't too much of a commute, but immediately we were taking those leaders out of what was familiar to them and putting them into a new space, because this was about having new conversations. If we delivered the same conversations in the same rooms that they'd done their training for the last 15 years, we would have to work really hard to shift thinking, because they had that the familiar pattern of that space, and they thought they knew what that space was about. So by getting them out of that, it immediately created a small shift. The bus unloaded. They walked up to this middle of nowhere hangar that looked like nothing, very simply, white brick wall, not much to it, single man door to get in. We walked them in, very bare bones room, very small room for 25 people. Just a simple TV on a stand with some safety notifications that they need to do, of course, and a pretty horrible looking muffin station, some bad coffee. So we pulled them out of the space to make them a bit uncomfortable and realize change is coming. We put them into a new space that kind of played with their emotions again, and they went, oh, we thought we were going to get something good here, and instead we're in a horrible space. We should have stayed at the office. We played a short video that we had to cover for legal reasons, and a door swung open to the main hangar area, fully blacked out room with vertical shafts of light on the floor, making like a leap pads to walk them into the room, some cool immersive music. These 25 people walked into the room, stepped into this open area that was designed for them. We blacked the room. And then on one side of the hangar, we had these large circles, interconnected circles that we projection mapped onto, with really powerful storytelling about safety, about environmental impact, about a lot of the really important issues for that organization, told by their workers, by their leaders, and it was pretty uncomfortable content. We weren't sugarcoating anything. We weren't being gentle. We were like, you are in this room today to address these things. That is why the wall is plastered with them. You are one circle. You are one piece that is interconnected with everybody else that is experiencing these things. And you have a contribution to make. And your contribution as a leader is to connect the dots and to connect the staff around it. So they experience that. From that immersive projection mapping experience, we moved them into a small group exercise, which was divided into another section with a different technology setup and a different way of learning. The group exercise was set in a circle. So 25 people sitting across from each other, having conversations about what were delivered in content and what it meant to them as leaders. And then experts came in and talked about how they can explore their leadership tasks and roles as we address these difficult things. But the important things that we put into the design of that space is when they're in that circle, there was supporting multimedia content. So we had some TVs around, but we wanted to make sure that we never took the eye gaze away from the people across the circle from them, because it was about connecting the humans to each other, not to the content. So the TVs had to be placed at a certain height so that you could keep staring at the person across from you and then just glance up to get your reference. Yeah. From that circle environment, we moved them into group sharing. We had digital whiteboarding or digital flip charts that they would do more workshops with. We would collect all of that stuff from all these 60 groups that went through, aggregate it together and create a sort of organic growing storyline that these leaders then had ongoing conversations outside of that day's experience about the stuff that they'd learned, about stuff that was coming up in future modules. And we essentially created a community with that activation. And of course we had a food area as well, and they had a great caterer that put on really, really great lunches and things like that. You've got to keep that stuff, the traditional event stuff happening. But what they said afterwards, after the 12-month activation, and put through all 60 modules and all 1,500 leaders, what they said is that was such a different way to approach leadership, to approach challenges and problems, and to co-create the solutions and understand what in the Event Design Collective, the braiding point. Understand that leaders' role in where they are in the process of change and how they support their teammates in the process of change and how all of those dots connect and how everything weaves together. I said it was so impactful that they're now building it into every leader onboarding that they do for the organization moving forward. And what was good for them, not so great for the companies involved, but what they learned so much from that immersive experience that they've shifted how they design their events to more experiential learning, gotten away from so much of the classroom style teaching, because they've recognized not only can this have impact with the leaders, but it can have impact with the people that they are leading as well. If we create experiences that are a bit stickier, more intimate, and more about the humans rather than perhaps the lean process that we're used to or the safety protocols that we're used to following. Because at the end of the day, you can document every rule and protocol on the planet. If the human beings don't choose to abide by it, choose to champion it, and choose to make it part of their culture, good luck.
Yeah. Super good example. And I've experienced similar things myself as a leader in one of the corporations. It's the interesting part of that. It's touching you, not from a surface, it's going deep into you when you design it properly. And then it's also, I mean, this 25 leaders in one room, I'm pretty sure that they're going out of that session, out of that year with a completely different relationship to themselves, but as well to each other than they would ever be able to have without that.
Yeah, and they feel, although we were delivering content to them, through the conversations, through the dialogue, and through that collecting of their feedback, they felt that they were co-creators of that change. So they're more likely to have agency and lead that change within their teams, because it's not the executive telling them. They were part of the process of creating that change. So they have agency of that change, and they are as invested, if not more so, than the executive in leading that change.
Yeah. So now I'm playing the devil's advocate. I'm the chief financial officer of my company. It's like, it sounds all amazing. I believe in what you're doing, but it's like there's never a return on investment.
Yeah.
What would you say on that?
That is a sure sign of poor design. Absolutely. You know, and one of the basics of design thinking, if we go back to the traditional design thinking circle that Tom and David Kelly are champions of, the idea that we empathize, we define, we ideate, we prototype, and this is where the problems come. The next step, test. Don't do effective testing. And events have been very guilty of this. A lot of event owners think that sending out a survey the week after is the measurement of success. My other favorite thing to say, the conference market, they've done a brilliant job in my 20 years working with them at measuring success. It involves a events coordinator or maybe even a junior volunteer standing at the back of the room doing 2, 4, 6, 8, 7, and counting how many people are sitting in seats. Because the number of people who turn up for the session is the measurement of success, not how much did they learn? Did that learning stick? Did that change what's happening in the organization? So to answer the CFO, yes, it would be a total waste of money if we cannot measure if we've been successful at changing behaviors. If we change behaviors, especially aligned to what the financial goals are, because that should be a parameter, a frame that we stay within for the sake of that organization. If we can't say to them, here's how we did it, here's how we failed, here's how we succeeded, that ambiguity, and that's what makes people uncomfortable. I've had, in my entire career, I've had very little struggles with getting CFOs to spend more if I can provide measurable results for what they spend. And the key to that is understanding measurement as part of design, not an afterthought. Yeah. So everything that we design, all of those touch points, all that experience journey stuff that I talked about, and all that instructional design, all of those elements, you need to build into the design. How will we measure that moment and success or failure in that moment? And what starts to happen as you build measurement tools in, one, you can justify to your executive why you're doing it. And two, you start to recognize in real time when things aren't going right, when the learning is not sticking, or the team isn't aligned, or there's confusion. And that offers you the opportunity to adapt fast.
Yeah.
And when CFOs not only have measurable outcomes, but they also recognize that you saw the chance of failure, or you saw the chance of diminished returns to what they expected, you adapted to that, and you can go to them and say, this is what you expected. This is the roadblock that we experienced. Here's how we adapted. And by the way, we got the results anyway. Perfect. If you don't have design and framework to back that up, it's really hard to be that quick and that adaptive and to deliver the results that the CFO, very finite mindset, very much profit and loss, right? A different way of thinking. If you can't deliver the stuff that's important to them in their language that they understand, you're never going to win them over. So you need to come to them in their realm, and their realm is measurement.
Yeah. And I think that's, it can't be imagined and pointed out enough that need to be part early on. I mean, it even starts with the perspective like you started, is you need to know where you want to be before you start planning. And that also includes the measurement. And I always call this the innovation GPS. I mean, it's in the end, it's like a measurement system you need to build up to be able to understand where you want to go and how you do that. It's So if imagine there are a couple of listeners, like one or two at least.
Yeah. Hi guys.
And that might be interesting. Oh, that really sounds interesting. How can they dig deeper into that? How can they explore a bit what you have been mentioning?
Yeah, so there's a couple of realms that we play in the Event Design Collective. We obviously, Event Design Collective, it's in the name. So if you want to find out more about the design methodology and the language we use, you can go to EDCO.global, EDCO.global, and you can actually download, we wrote a book called Event Design Handbook, which talks about our language and our process for designing events. So people can jump in there right now, check out that book and look at what that language is. That's the event design side of what we do. We also, as you've picked up, work in change management as well. So we're very excited. Coming up in June and later on this year, we're going to be rolling out our new book called Design to Change. And it's very much focused on, like we've been having, that executive level conversation and understanding the role of events in creating change and how we can start conversations and maintain conversations like we've had today with executives, so that we stop in the events industry being order takers that are less focused on the outcomes, and instead start to craft our own skills at understanding our role in creating that change. So you can access a teaser of that book online right now at edco.global/change. And we're working on that. It's going to be an interesting book that we release, because as we've all been going through this pandemic, we've been opened up to new ways of experiencing content like never before. I mean, guys like you and I were dabbling online anyway. We were doing this stuff for many years before, but the rest of the world caught up with us. So we're going to leverage that when we release this new book. And we're actually at the moment collecting a whole bunch of other content from experts, not only in the events industry, but in business in general. And we're going to have ancillary multimedia content that you can access via our website and different channels, so that you can start to experience these conversations about change and about how events create change in different modes of delivery. You can watch a video like this. You could participate in an audio-only conversation and really start to not only see the theory behind change management and how events create change, but start to experience the kinds of conversations that need to happen for us to have that impact that we've been talking about. And it really comes down to, you can have the best events production skills in the world, if you can't have the conversations with executive and you can't unlock all of these things we talked about, like empathy and alignment and all that stuff, then you're gonna have a hard time, and the world's gonna rush past you because the world's changed and we're all looking for outcomes and measurable results.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to transition now to the last part of the podcast, which is a little bit of slightly disconnected to what we have talked until now, asking you a couple of rapid fire questions. So number one, if you would have the chance to work with a project, leading a project or be part of a project that's impacting every human being on Earth, what project would it be and why would you like to be involved in that?
I've been mulling over this issue for a long time, and I think the pandemic pushed us away. But I'm really interested in the problems that the planet is facing with plastics. I would like to create an experience or create a series of events that help people to understand what the true problem of plastics is.
Why would you like to do that?
Why would I like to do that? I think, and I think we're going to see an even bigger problem with plastics. I mean, obviously, what's going on in the ocean is a big issue with all the plastics that are happening there. But I think the issue we truly face in plastics is the onus and the responsibility is being put on consumers. We're at fault, when in, I think, reality, it's business, it's consumer packaging companies that need to change. And we're not addressing them. And if we are having these kinds of conversations, it's punitive and penalty based from government to say you're doing too much. And I think we need to change behaviors both of the consumers and of the companies pushing the products out. And the only way that we're going to achieve that, I think, is for everybody to truly experience the depth of this problem, and experience it in their own perspective, because the packaging companies have a different perspective to the consumers, and the government has a different perspective again. So I think there's a really meaty challenge to address there. There's big behavior to change. And I think everybody who's been trying to address it has been struggling to get it on the agenda and to get the right kinds of conversations about it, because it becomes politicized so quickly.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about an interesting example on something similar, but not on plastic, which was on climate change and like air pollution. Yeah. They have built an experience where you go into a small container, and the container is basically giving you the smog of, I think it was Beijing or somewhere. Yeah. Like very, very bad smoke. And then they said, you're now staying here for 2 hours in that container. Yeah. And that's other people are living in that circumstances, and you just need to be there 2 hours. So which opens up the eyes of the people in a completely different environment than seeing pictures or videos.
Yes.
Quite absolutely. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, the question is, at that point, how are you going to turn that individual who goes through that experience into an advocate for the movement? And then how are you going to measure if that individual who went through that experience actually changes their behavior on a longer term? Because we'll all go home and, stop using plastic for 3 months afterwards, maybe. And then we'll forget, and then convenience will come in, and then all of a sudden we revert back to our behaviors. Yeah. So I love it. I love that idea, but back to our earlier points, how are we going to measure if we've been successful in changing that behavior at a core level? Interesting.
Yeah. Great. Next question. Where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that from a person and or business or both perspectives.
Where will I be from a year from now? Well, I'm going to have to do a trip back down to Australia at some stage, because it's been a few years and we've got to see the family down there. So I think that'd be a fun thing personally. I would love to go back to a castle in Poland and hang out with some people at the College of Extraordinary Experiences. Yeah. That's a pretty magical space. I had a pretty good time there, so I'd like to go back there. And I'd like to have some downtime, because the wife and I have been stuck in the house and working like mad. So I would like some distraction, some adventure, like we talked about at the very start. So maybe even, let's assume pandemic's in a good place. Some Southeast Asia, I think, is on the cards as well.
Sounds interesting. So last question. How do you keep yourself informed? How do you keep yourself educated? What are the different mediums you're using?
Yeah, I mean, community. There's tons of great technology out there now with, different feeds and different ways to aggregate content, but they're all algorithm based. And so they're going to end up sending you the same sort of stuff because, you'll keep clicking. So I've always been very, very conscious of that. And instead, I've trusted people over computers. So any opportunity I have to meet new people and expand my circle, and people like you have been delivering me great content and great reference points to then explore other opportunities. So I always say to everybody, it's not about how meaty your LinkedIn feed is. It's about the people you're having conversations with. So really network.
Yeah, love that. And I do it in a similar way.
Yeah,
that's how we got to know each other.
Exactly. Great example.
So really the last question is, how can people reach out to you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the social media channels. My handle generally is at AV, Anthony Vade, Connecting, at AV Connecting. You can check out online, look up #event canvas, and you'll see some of the community online. It's just, there's so many people contributing to that kind of conversation. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, so very happy to connect with people on that. And of course, edco.global, tons of content for there. And you can get through to me via that website in multiple ways. If you're exploring change management or if you're exploring event design, I suggest you start there, download that book. I mean, it's 100 pages for free. It's a no-brainer for most people to sort of start to explore the language. And then just reach out, just say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. Can I book some time? Because as you've probably catching on about at this point I'm all about this kind of dialogue. I think there's more value to that than saying, follow me on social media. I'd rather have a conversation with you.
Love it. Yeah. And I will put the links as well into the show notes so people can straight away click on it. Anthony, it was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.